Well, hello and welcome to week 4 of the Zwift Racing League WTRL. I'm joined tonight by Anna Russel. Of course, it's evening here in Australia and in New Zealand. Anna, we've got the team's time trial up this week. We've had one 2 weeks ago. We've also had 2 points races. What can I say? The series is really heating up.
Yeah, this is going to be one exciting night. I've never actually commentated a team time trial before. I've watched quite a few, watched the Prem divisions earlier today, and we're in for a real firecracker of a race tonight.
Well, Anna, more than just watching them or tonight commentating them, you'll be racing them at some point because you're certainly a very high-powered Zwift racer and a self-confessed Zwift nerd as well. We might also add. Tonight, they're
Yeah.
heading out on course on the Magnificent Eight. We're going to unpack the course in a little bit, but first let's take a look at the women's standings so that we can get a bit of an idea what we're expecting out on course. So, Anna, can you talk us through the women's standings?
Yeah, so we've got AHDRL Ace of Cakes and number 1 at the moment, Aero Flyers 2, and BRT Devil Kittens moving up into 3rd. They had a stellar race. Best team tactics I've seen in the race last week. Zsun, AHDRL, and another few AHDRL teams, and another BRT team rounded up by Cryogen. But watch those two at the top. I think this is going to be a close matched race. Last week it was, in the last time trial, it was a close one between AHDRL Ace of Cakes and Aero Flyers in second. So Aero will really need to move into that top position tonight. Having a look at Division C, you've got TBR Smile On, the BRT Fiery Kittens, and top 3 AHDRL We Ate the Cake. And you can see the top 4 to 10 as well. So a big field in the women's CCAT tonight as well.
Well, Anna, I love some of the team names. There's an awful lot of kittens going around, but particularly the caffeines. I'm feeling that. I'm really feeling the caffeines side of things. It's really interesting, Anna, because in the team's time trial tonight, we'll see time gaps. And last week, the Ace of Cakes, they were 34 seconds up when they won the team's time trial in the A category. But that doesn't really matter because it's all on points. And at the top of the table, it is very tight. So the points does take into account both the points race and the team's time trial. So strategy tonight is a really important thing. Let's dissect the course a little bit. The Magnificent Eight, just shy of 30 kilometres. It would be pretty easy to say that it's a flat course, but it is far from. At about the 8K mark, they go over that reverse hilly KOM. And Anna, I think that's going to be a real challenge for some of these teams.
Yeah, this is a really interesting course because you would be remiss to say it's a really flat course. It starts off with almost a 3% hill straight off the gun. Then you go to a right, head out to Volcano, but after that you've got Italian villas, then you're heading up that KOM like you saw. That's a really rolling part of the course, and it is so easy to get detached from your team there. As soon as you get detached, you're slowing the momentum. I've said to my team tomorrow, the key words in a team time trial: communication and momentum. And I think we're going to see a few teams fall to pieces on those first hills.
Well, I think that's our bingo word for the night is communication, because that'll be such a big part of it. So the last team's time trial they did, they went over the RGV, which was pretty much pancake flat. It was a similar distance and they covered it in about 36 minutes. This week we're looking at the women's teams, the top women's teams taking around 39 minutes. So it's not a massive difference, but they're still pretty high speeds. They're averaging over 40 kilometres an hour. It doesn't leave a lot of room for error, does it?
No, and you saw Team Hino take out the women's race this morning, and they were averaging 44k an hour. I mean, I think tonight we'll be looking at a more around that 43k an hour mark for those top teams. But like I said, Aero, this is the time they've got to pull together. I imagine they would have done a lot of practice between the last team time trial and this one because they know this is where they're going to have to take out the AHDRL Ace of Cakes team. And we'll talk about it a bit further on when we go through the race. I've gone deep into the weeds here, Katie. I've gone really deep. I've got whiteboards at home with little strategies around where people should sit in the team time trial. And I've come down to a 3 options. You've got a hybrid, you've got a team time trial traditional, and then you've got an organized chaos. So I'll talk about those a little bit more as we look at the race tonight. But that's where I've gone in the weeds. And I don't want to give away too many secrets, but I think people may learn a little bit tonight about what strategy they want to follow on the upcoming races.
Well, and look, any budding TTT riders can tune in to hear your wisdom, because it is interesting, Anna, and there is so much strategy involved, not just in Zwift racing, but certainly in team time trials. And honestly, with the hill at 8 kilometres, it wouldn't be a bad idea to burn a few riders in the lead up to that. Yeah, if they're the kind of riders that just wouldn't survive the climb. But we'll get into those details as we're out on course and actually watching the riders go. We'll get live pictures as soon as we can. So let's get down to those and see the riders battling it out, because I want to hear some of these theories, Anna, some of these strategies, if you will. So tell me about this first strategy you've got.
Okay, well, we'll start with the team time trial traditional. So everyone would kind of know that one. That's you're riding single file, you're taking set turns in a set order. That's what you'd see in the Tour de France kind of rides where people are racing the team time trial in real life. I do actually see we're watching Cryogen. I think they've already jettisoned a rider off the back. So we'll just cover that for a little bit before I cover the other two. Looks like she's got a few connection issues. Unfortunately, 7 seconds back. I mean, this is one of those Zwift mechanicals that you just don't want to happen, because already only a few kilometers in and they're down to 4 riders. Absolutely unideal start to the race for Cryogen here.
Well, it is interesting, the Zwift mechanical, because for the most part, what something like a TTT on Zwift offers is it's almost like track racing, Anna, where you don't have a lot of variables. You can be pretty sure that you'd have to be unlucky to get a flat, you'd have to be unlucky to have technical issues, and you can pretty much just warm up and focus on, getting physically and mentally ready. But of course, it doesn't always work like that. And we're actually seeing a rider get dropped here now. This is danger territory. We're only 2.5 kilometres in, and this just highlights how careful and cautious the teams need to be. And something that I used to hear, Anna, when I raced teams time trials, and I've got to say I had a love-hate relationship with them because they can be brutal, is you're only as strong as your weakest link. And that's not to say that any of the riders are weak, but if you have some powerhouses getting on the front and accelerating or not riding smooth, it does an absolute disservice to the team. So
and
these
guys
are struggling here.
Yeah, they look like they're working together though. So it looks like one of the riders has dropped back here, just with the visor on. Sandy here from Crojan. She's dropped back to just pull her back up. They have absolutely imploded though, and I've already seen during that time you were talking, Katie, that the BRT team has pulled in almost 15 seconds on them within the last 1 kilometre. So Cryogen, unfortunately, just really not going to be their day. Already you can see out there on course. And interesting enough, BRT, who are sitting in 3rd place, we've only got 4 riders here. So whether they've dropped someone with another technical issue or they've just got 4 riders to field today, but you want the full 6. You want the full 6 going almost to the end to have the best time today. And we'll have a look at these, because I think they may be following what I call the organized chaos strategy. So like I said, there's the team time trial traditional, but this looks like organized chaos. And this is where you ride as a blob and you just have whoever's feeling good riding on the front for the highest power they can maintain for the longest time. Then they drop off and someone else just takes their place, and you're constantly talking on Discord and you just move around, flowing around that little blob. And that's sort of what we're seeing here with the BRT mix. But I'm going to give away a little secret. This is what I went down into a bit of a deep dive, had it on the whiteboard, showed the hubby, who just didn't really care 1 iota about what I was talking about. But hopefully a few of those listening today will. The hybrid strategy. So the best draft you get in Zwift is actually the 3rd rider back. So if you can put your top 3 power riders in the top 3 positions and they ride single file, then you have a little bunch behind with the 3 weaker riders behind that 3rd rider. Now those 3 rotate to have longer turns, and then the weaker riders slot in where necessary. I think if a team can pull that off, that may actually be the fastest way to do a team time trial.
I like it. I mean, I'm having a bit of a giggle at your whiteboard and your long-suffering husband sitting through your Zwift strategy sessions. But I think you're onto something, Anna, because we have to consider the draft effect in Zwift. It's about 35%. There is quite a significant difference depending on what position you hold in that line. And for example, we're expecting the lead team to average around the 5.6 watt mark. But Second wheel, that drops down to 4.3. Third wheel, that drops down below 4 watts per kilo. So there really is a very big differential. But more than that, Anna, we need to consider what happens when a rider unnecessarily accelerates through. And it can be that moment that breaks a lot of legs. And so it needs to be a very tempered acceleration as they do roll through if they're going to start swapping turns. That does take a bit of time. So
Yeah.
you're a Zwift racer. Is this something that you and your team will do? Practice out on course doing those slow accelerations through?
Yeah, so we actually went and recceed the course over the weekend. So I'm deeply familiar with this course. Now I've recceed it 3 times out on my bike, trying to figure out the best Ks per hour you can hold at certain power numbers. Again, I'll tell you, Katie, I've gone deep into the weeds here. So what is an interesting strategy that some teams have, which we may trial it tomorrow, I'm not quite sure, is you have one rider in a team of 6 absolutely dedicated to closing the gaps. So if someone pulls off and they just pull a little bit too hard and they drop that second rider, that gap filler, they never take a turn on the front, but they'll jet up and they'll close that gap. So that is a good strategy if you've got a big power differential between your best rider and your weakest rider.
So we're looking at the AHDRL bombshells at the moment. They came in 7th place in the A division last week. They averaged just under 40k an hour, or just under around 38.6k an hour. For that put them adrift of the winners, which was their AHDRL compatriots in the Ace of Cakes by about 3 minutes and 15 seconds. What we can expect is that the different teams within all of the divisions will have different levels of experience. It doesn't necessarily reflect the engines on these riders. I think that in this case, and also in IRL teams time trials, it's a lot about experience. So the bombshells we can see, they're very much picking up on your hybrid strategy. And I think that is a strategy that certainly suits the newer teams because you will have a bigger differential between their lead rider, who may in fact be on the team to offer experience and guidance than some of those more drilled, faster teams who may be full of kind of absolute ace riders like the Ace of Cakes. Well, I mean, kind of goes by the name, doesn't it?
Yeah. And I mean, I have to say as well, we mentioned it at the beginning. Today, it's all about communication and momentum. Those are the 2 key words here. As we just see an AHDR rider just dropping off the back. This is what I talked about earlier. This is the Italian village. And just before that village, you're on a little bit of dirt road, which slows you down, but then it goes up to around a 3-4% gradient. So this period of time when you hit this hill, you go down, then you hit another hill, and then you hit the KOM. This is the time they're going to jettison riders off. You can already see here dropping to 2.6 watts per kg. I don't think she's going to make it back on, and they may have just made the decision that's going to be one of the riders dropped, and we've just got these 4 to the finish line.
Well, it's a pretty big decision, but as you rightfully touch on, Anna, there is a big differential when they do go over either this cobbled section as they are now or the dirt section versus the tarmac. There is about a 10% increase in what's required to hold the same speed. Some riders will not be anywhere near their limit and naturally be able to do it. But we're watching T Wright from Zed's Son R at 172 heart rate. That's not a lot left. She doesn't have a lot of room to give there.
And again, they're not doing great here with their team strategy. Off the front, pushing hard. You've got to keep in mind tonight, it's not about individual heroism. It's not about going out and showing that you can ride 350 watts for a minute. Because who cares if your whole team drops off the back of you? So tonight, it's all about teamwork. You've got to be talking on Discord continuously. If this rider here, you can already see D Shaw pushing a little bit too hard on their turns, that person behind's got to be yelling out, slow down, take a longer turn. So when you're looking at team strategy, your higher power riders, those who have an FTP that's a lot higher than the others, they need to take longer turns at a lower FTP than they're used to. But they'll take that longer turn. And I think here, they just really need to get her to rein it in and, be more about the team.
Well, so Anna, you are all into the weeds, as you say it, with the strategies. And one of the cool things about commentating with people from different countries is I keep picking up all these delightful sayings. So I might steal that if you don't mind. is certainly, you say there's no room for individual heroism, but there certainly is a need for communication because a lot of the stronger riders will feel like this is my opportunity to go. We can even see Zed Sun Ah here catching a few of those riders who have been
They've
dropped,
caught
and
that
etiquette
dropped,
is, of
that,
course, for them
yeah.
to move over. But when we talk about Discord and the communication, Anna, is there a team manager that would be sitting and directing them, or would it be one of the riders on the team playing leader out on the road and letting the riders know, speed up, slow down, look out?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, Katie. What we have in our team, in the Prem division, you have a dedicated director sportif. They're there giving encouragement, saying what's coming up on the course. Sorry, as we just see Zed Sun here passing AHDRL in anger, really. They've gone right through them and pushed ahead. So just got to make sure that last rider gets off the draft of the AHDRL team and pulls back in. It looks like she will there. So yeah, like I was saying, it really is dependent on the team. For our team tomorrow, I will probably play the role of DS and racing in the team time trial, but that's where sometimes you'll have that gap filler role where they may not take the leads, they're not cruising, but they can still talk. I actually listened in on our Prem team this morning on their Discord channel, creepily, just in the background with mute on, and wow, there is not a lot of talking going on. There's a lot of puffing and a lot of heaving and kind of one-word sentences. So sometimes it's really useful having a DS who can really make sense of all the moaning and the groaning and the heaving that's happening during a time trial like this.
I'm sorry, Anna, that's an absolute crack of that description that you give around the kind of sounds that are on Discord. But that is a real thing, and I think it takes a little bit of getting used to, certainly. And I think that you point out a very relevant thing, which is that different teams are at different levels of development. So Premier League will have an individual director sportif sitting there and directing, but some of the teams in Community League will just be starting out. We just saw the Zunderstruck. Gee, they're going well today because they just passed the Fluffy Buns, who started a minute in front of them. But last week they were only 28 seconds in front of them at the finish. So they are having either an absolute belter of a ride, or the Fluffy Buns are struggling a little bit. I guess overall we will see where that works out in the wash. This course, Anna, isn't too dissimilar to what we saw a couple of weeks ago at RGV. RGV admittedly was a little bit flatter, but we certainly saw a little bit more overall speed, and some of the teams were able to keep the team together for a little bit longer. I think these little lumps are probably playing more, wreaking more havoc this week than we even maybe they expected.
I think so. I mean, the strategy I'd go with on these little climbs is you put your fastest watt per kg riders up the front. So that's your lighter riders who have a pretty good power output, and just say, look, you guys set the pace, hit the watts we've targeted, and you guys just go for it. The heavier riders will catch up on the downhill. So I wouldn't be surprised if a few might have a little splits, but they'll know that they'll catch up again. This course, different to RGV. I think RGV, even though it was almost pancake flat, the last part had so many twists and turns, which is really, really hard to stay together as a group. And after this climb, we're basically all flat through the desert for the next 17 kilometers before we hit a tiny little sort of uprise out of the desert, and then another one out of the Ocean Boulevard tunnel. So after this climb, if they can just stay together, preferably in the group of 6, they'll have a massive aero advantage when they hit the desert. If they're starting to jettison riders on these hills, they're going to start really hemorrhaging time through those flat portions.
Well, so let's dive into the strategy, because I know you love it in the weeds there, Anna. There is an idea in teams time trials that riders will rotate every 20 seconds, every 500 meters, every 2 minutes, according to the individual strengths, just to make sure that they keep that speed up. It's something that happens, of course, on the team's pursuit on the track. You essentially do as many laps until you start to drop speed, because the idea is that when you move over and let somebody else take pace, that you are dropping them off, essentially. That's what you're doing. You're dropping them off at speed. And so that is what these teams are looking to do, to make sure that when that lead rider pulls off and moves and the second rider has to come out of that draft, that they're not having to accelerate to get back to speed, but that they can hold a fairly consistent speed overall. We're looking at the pictures, and there's something that stands out to me, and that's that a lot of the riders are choosing to use the Tron bike. So to get the Tron bike, Anna, of course, you have to have climbed an awful lot of mountains. Ange McRae on screen, and I've ridden with her a little bit on Zwift, and a bit of a hitter in my mind. I think she's got a whole lot of engine in that caboose for sure, and she's certainly on that Tron bike. Is the Tron bike the choice that you would take if you had the option? Because I'm also going to point out before you answer that, Anna, that to anybody watching, not everybody has the same option of bikes. So it depends how often you Zwift, what level you're at, and then it determines what bike that you're able to purchase.
So if we look at Shelby from BRT there, she's next to that purple Tron bike. She's got the disc wheel, the Specialized Venge or S-Works, I believe. That would be the bike I'm choosing, and that's actually what I'll be riding tomorrow. So usually that disc wheel on that Specialized bike is your fastest option on a course like today. Now, the reason those other riders will have Tron bikes, not only do they look really cool, that's probably a lot of the reason people choose them, but that disc wheel, you have to be like almost, I think, level 35. So it is very, very tricky to get. A lot of people got the Tron bikes during the lockdowns earlier this year because it was a great time to go, head up the Alpe de Zwift to do some Everesting attempts. So a lot of people have got Tron, but not as many have been able to get to level, I think it's around 34. Anyone on the socials can let me know what actual level that is. That would be the rider, the bike that I would choose for this course. If you can't have that disc wheel, then yes, Tron. And then the next one after that would be the Zip 808s. Now, I think that's sort of a late 20s kind of a setup, late level 20s. So then you might see some riders there too with those deep dish wheels. But definitely loving Shelby's setup. That's what I'll be rocking tomorrow. So A+ to her for picking the right bike.
Well, I've got to say, Shelby last week in Richmond rode an absolute cracker of a race. She was super impressive, Anna. And I think more than the engine that she had, because she clearly has that, is her strategy. So I think that on many fronts, she's a rather multifaceted Zwift rider, certainly one to look out for. And Doris Ma in there as well. This BRT team, a lot of them from Melbourne, and they have suffered through a lockdown. I think, honestly, Anna, that a lot of them have found a bit of, if we can say, togetherness through the lockdown. They've met a lot on Zwift, and they've used it as an opportunity to take on some challenges that maybe they ordinarily wouldn't have. We see them go over the KOM there. That would be sweet relief for them. They'll get a bit of recovery now on the other side.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really good point you make. I know during lockdown, my Mother's Day present to myself was to go do the PRL full on Zwift. So I got 5 hours uninterrupted from the family to head down to the suffer room and do that. And, I think that a lot of people during these times when you've been stuck at home have knocked off these challenges and become really, really fit. As we see, we're just hitting the fluffy buns now. So they're coming through onto the desert. So they'll have a sort of a bit of a false flat at around 1-2% here, and they're just passing, looks like the AHDRL bombshells. So two teams, same name, but passing each other, and they've just got to make sure that they don't get caught up in each other's draft. Another little hot tip is, as you can see on the right-hand side, the names are scrolling through. A really useful thing in the team time trial is your Zwift name, not your Zwift power name, which has to be a certain way, but your Zwift name, you could keep it short. And actually, another little hot tip that we're doing with our team tomorrow is putting the position that we're riding into our name so that everyone can see on screen, because you can't underestimate the fact that you almost can't think in this kind of a race. Your heart rate is just that high. So you can see on the screen very easily what position you should be riding and who you should be following turns with. So another little tip there for you. But we are watching AHDRL here, hitting this at pretty high watts. Looks like we're coming through riding at 180 beats per minute with Blake here in the Fluffy Buns team. That's a really high heart rate for 12 kilometres into the race.
I think we'll put those all down to Tuesday tips by Anna. I'm loving these Zwift trips. So we've seen the Fluffy Buns do an overtake. What I noticed, Anna, though, was the etiquette that happened. So before they did the overtake, Michelle Ferris, can we just pause for a second and mention the fact that she's an Olympic silver medalist on the track
in the
sprint? Okay, so she's got
that's
credential. But this would probably be the first team's time trial series that she's raced. She's a very, very competent athlete, and I love that in her retirement, I put that in inverted commas, she's on Zwift, absolutely kicking butt. But what I love about the Fluffy Buns is that they've followed etiquette and they've let people know that they're overtaking. And so that happens by a message, and we see that on the right of screen. And there is etiquette, Anna, because as I believe it, if you're being overtaken, the correct thing to do, and I think, for any APAC person, we understand cricket, certainly. It's a little bit like cricket. It's kind of a gentleman's, gentle ladies game, is that you pull over, you slow down, and you allow the team to slingshot past without getting in their way. Is that correct? So you drop a message, let them know you're coming, and then get out of the way?
Yeah, it's really interesting, right? It's very, I know you come from a cycling background, so don't hold it against me, but with my triathlon background, this is very similar to what you have when you're racing in your long distance triathlons and you've got to maintain a 12-meter distance. When you come through to pass someone, you can't be in their draft, and you've got to pass them with intent, and you've got to move really quickly, and the rider behind has to drop back out of your draft. Very similar here to what I'm seeing. As we're looking at the Aeroflyers now, this is a team I'm super pumped to see tonight, because this is all on the line for them. They have been taken over. Their first slot has been taken away by an AHDRL team, and they need to move these riders up. Now, is this a team, or is it a team of individuals? Because we see Kay Garland there, absolutely, I'd say, race of her life last week. And can they ride as a team? That's what I want to see tonight.
Well, I think the team comes into it a lot more than anybody could even appreciate until you're out there doing it. I think in theory, Anna, that a lot of people think, I'm strong, I can sit on the front, I can drag them along, they'll love me for it, no worries. But in reality, those accelerations can break legs more than we know. Katrina Garland, she was so impressive last week in Richmond. And can I just underline that so with billion O's, because she really made that race. And I've got to say, super exciting to watch. Like, I was absolutely cheering them on, and not least because they have those delightful Aussie colours on. But Katrina Garland almost carries a responsibility in this team. She's the strongest, but she could make or break this team as she goes along. And I hope that the Aero Flyers, especially because they're pretty up there on the overall, they're sitting in second. The last TTT, they were only 34 seconds behind the Ace of Cakes. They're in with a very, very big chance overall here. And I want to make sure that they take that responsibility and work very well together and not blow each other up.
Yeah, and Katie, you used to race bikes. Did you race team time trials when you were racing?
Yeah, I did. Love-hate is all I can say. Team time trials are tough because no matter what role you play, if you're more of a power time trial rider, you're terrified about the hills. If you're more of a climber, you're absolutely terrified about those flat and fast sections and making sure you put enough power out. So, mentally, I think it's as much of a game as physically.
Yeah, how does it vary, do you think, between what we're seeing in the vert? They're just, it would just be so different, right? I look at the team time trials in real life and I think that looks horrifically dangerous.
Well, that makes me laugh because you're not wrong. I mean, a lot of the riders sit literally, millimeters from each other's back wheel. And I must say, I find myself in trouble in bunch rides sometimes because I sit so close to wheels. After so many years in the pro peloton, it just becomes natural instinct. And that's when you can get yourself in trouble and have a clipped wheel, which you don't have uh, in the virtual world. But I don't think it's dissimilar, because I think the biggest thing in teams time trials is actually the psychological side. I think each rider not only has to psych themselves up, but as a team, they need to communicate very well, and they all need to be on the same level. There is kind of a special skill, I think, in any athlete where you line up prepared to suffer. And it's very different to a points race. You know that there'll be hard bits, there'll be easy bits. But for a team's time trial, Anna, I mean, you're a triathlete, you know, that it's not too different to what you do. You're out there, you know it's going to hurt. I mean, all of these riders we can see on screen, and I've got to say those Tron bikes look quite lovely actually in the fluoro. They're all absolutely on their limit, and they're suffering, and they've had to, before the race, prepare themselves mentally for that. And when it starts hurting, they have to kind of settle into the comfort of the discomfort.
Exactly. I think what's so different with these, right? Like, yes, doing Ironman kind of races, doing half Ironmans, you're sitting in the TT position for very long periods of time. You know it's going to hurt, but you don't have that risk of letting down your teammates. And I think that's what you see in races tonight. And, I get super nervous about team time trials because I just don't want to let down my team. I don't want to sort of go too hard and drop people, or the flip side, get dropped off the back and let them down and not be able to finish and, give the best draft. I am watching Aero here with what I just saw as a beautiful TTT traditional position. Like I said, they've been out practicing. I follow a few of these riders, and I know that these guys are coming in. They know tonight's race is important, and it's just going to be a bit of a psychological blow to AHDR if they can beat them in tonight's team time trial, because then what can AHDR do? Can they practice over the next 2 weeks and get even better? I mean, that's what makes this league so exciting, is you have these little internal team competitions, and you just have to keep getting better and better and better. And like I said, when you're sort of looking at a team manager here, you just go into detail on tiny little, I'll use an INEOS word, marginal gains that you can get to just eke out those seconds, because 1 second will be the difference between maximum points and then second place points.
Well, the marginal gains philosophy, won a few Tour de France's and most recently a Giro d'Italia. So I think we can agree, Anna, that that's a pretty good strategy to use the odd marginal gains one. But it is interesting what you say about the team's time trial and the pressure compared to being a triathlete. And I think that that's a very big part of the psychology of this, because a lot of these riders will have gained spots on this team by riding as individuals, by performing, by power numbers, by knowing they can do it. Then jumping in to a team, it is quite a different thing, because again, we talked about Kim Garland as a example in the Aero Flyers. She's so strong that it's not for her about just going as hard as she can. She has a responsibility with the amount of power that she wields in order to use that to the end of the team and not just ride away from them, because of course it's absolutely of no benefit for her to just show off how powerful she is, which is quite different to a points race. And week in and week out, they're going from one to the other. It takes quite a bit of dedication, I think, to the craft of arting. The craft of Zwifting. Isn't that me with young kids saying craft and art? My goodness.
I've got to say, I had a great arts and crafts day as well today with my kids, but we'll talk about that another time. I'm actually just looking at their speed here, and it's a little bit slower than I had thought. I said earlier, the Prem teams are riding around 44k an hour on average, and it looks like BRT here holding 40k an hour at around that. It looks like about 230 watts for those riders at the front. And I just wonder, I said it once, I'll say it again. Communication and momentum, key words in a team time trial. And it just looks like, you can see that they dropped to 38, then we're back up to 40, 41. They're just kind of losing a little bit of momentum here in BRT, although they're their structure looks good here. I like the way they're riding. Something's happening where they just, when each person takes it, you can see it again, just drop down again to 38, then back up to 40. You have to be staying at a consistent speed that whole time. And you just wonder, sometimes you just need to get away from looking at a power number, and you need to make sure that that speed and momentum is staying there. And I just wonder, it would be great to just listen in on this Discord and hear what these guys are saying, because I feel as though they're in a group of 5 here. I think one may actually be suffering a bit. As we flip back here to Cryogen, just with the 4 riders out now, they had a bit of a nightmare start to today's race, but looks like these 4 have solidified how they're going.
Yeah, communication is a big one, Anna. I think that is absolutely spot on. And wouldn't it be fun if we could have race radio and hear what they were all saying and the noises they were all making? Or as you said earlier, maybe a whole lot of heavy breathing and not a lot else, because it is pretty difficult at these heart rates to communicate effectively. But, we expect that the winner will have an average over that 40 kilometre an hour mark. But yeah, some of the teams are starting to slow down a bit. I wonder though, Anna, if that dip every time is definitely down to communication, because they don't quite anticipate that the other rider will be pulling off. So there is, even if it's a 1 second, a 2 second delay where the rider pulls off and rider number 2 says, oh, it's my turn, and then they lift it back up. But that up and down, you want the power graph to be fairly consistent. When you start getting the dips up and down, that is not a fast strategy.
No, and that's where they just start to lose a bit of momentum. And I think, you've got to think about where you're placing your riders in their position order as well. Because what some teams, like I said, there's that organized chaos strategy. And what you could do there is just whoever feels good goes on the front. The issue is if someone who's been on the front, they're riding at, 250, then the next rider says, oh, I'm feeling good, but they can actually only hold 220, then suddenly you've got a massive dip in power as well, and that equates to a massive dip in speed. So I believe that if you have a more set position, so you have riders coming through who you sort of gradually lower their ability to hold that power as they're moving through, and so you don't have the big gaps between your best rider and your weakest rider. You sort of graduate. I think that may just lead to a little bit more of a maintained momentum. We'll see tomorrow. We'll see if that actually pans out, but I do believe that you can't just have these big jumps. And we can see AHDRL, the fluffy buns, they're holding a good 41k an hour here. They're rolling through really nicely. So we're watching Clark here. She's riding around 213, 14 watts. A nice heart rate, 160, so not absolutely at the limit. Keeping a fairly steady cadence as well. I always find on Zwift, it's an interesting one. Sometimes we ride the best power. You just have to slow your cadence down a little bit and just put more force through those pedals, which is a little bit different to how you sometimes ride in real life, where you just want a more 90, 95 cadence. So you can see some of them, they are riding at that slower cadence as we're following Ferris here. And I'm liking how these guys are going. I'm liking this Fluffy Buns team. They're keeping a nice, tight little unit. They're taking their turns, and I'm not seeing massive drops off in speed as people are moving around.
Well, and I think that's an interesting point, Anna, because in real life, good time trialists often ride at around 110 cadence, between 100 110 cadence. I know when Ellen Van Dyke was world champion in the time trial, Linda Willemsen, they both averaged around the 110 cadence mark. It's really high and really fast and really efficient. But in general, in the Zwift world, we don't sit at those kinds of cadences. In fact, sitting at that kind of cadence on a trainer makes you feel like you're sprinting. That's not as efficient. It's a very different modality of riding. And I think that for some of the riders, it is a bit of a transition across to trainer riding versus the kind of riding that you may do on the road or the track. I mean, Michelle Ferris, we're watching her now. She's sitting at 81 cadence, and I can tell you when she was sprinting for a gold medal at the Olympic Games, she was riding at about 140 cadence. So this is a whole new skill for her, and I even think that in time Michelle Ferris will certainly add a lot more to the Fluffy Buns as she just reaches that potential that she has in this event, in the team's time trial event, which is a little bit different to her history, but she's certainly one of the most capable and I would say most intimidating riders out on course. We're watching the Aero out. Oh gosh, they're clocking along. They are heading for a catch here. The Aero Flyers to the Ace
And
of
have they still got
Cakes.
all 6? Or have they dropped down to, looks like they dropped down to 5, or they started with 5. But yeah, like you said, they're catching up to that Ace of Cakes team pretty fast, 9 seconds back now, and they've got them in their sights. They're going along this desert. Like I said, I'm impressed. This Aero team, I mean, someone from the team, correct me if I'm wrong, but they have been practicing because they look far better than they did 2 weeks ago. A tight unit, all taking turns. You know, at the start, I wondered a team of individuals or a team. And I think we're looking at a team here. They've really come together. There's some champions in here, like you said, ex-Olympians, but they're using their strengths, utilizing it. And I think AHDR's got to watch out. I think they might be knocked off their top perch after tonight.
Yeah, I mean, what do they say? There's no I in team. It's certainly a team of individuals is of no use. Cycling is IRL or in the Zwift world, certainly a team sport. And I know for a lot of newcomers, that's a hard concept to grasp. And quite honestly, you're a triathlete, Anna, well, that's your background. I think we can call you a cyclist now. But there's a lot of triathletes who come across to the sport and struggle a little bit because they've more than got the engine and the lungs for it. They've got the legs, the lungs, they're ready for it, but they don't quite grasp the idea that one person wins, but it is a team effort in order to get there. I would say that this concept in the Zwift world is absolutely the best way to illustrate team because it's a points race. So even in what we would normally call a road race, it actually comes down to points and not the individual strength. And I think it's a really, really good way, Anna, of teaching riders the sport and the tactics of cycling. We see another overtake here. This is happening quite a lot. This did not happen in the first T time trial around the RGV, but Magnificent 8 as well. There's some magnificence coming out here.
Oh, I love that line. I love that line, Katie. Oh, that's fantastic. AHDRL, Ace of Cakes. So this is the team that's really leading the way in the women's APAC division. And we're looking here, I think it was Kim Hurst was leading that out. This is danger time for Aero because this is a strong team of 6 that they've still got after 22.8 kilometers. So danger time for Aero, who's down to that 5-rider group, and it looks like they're about to catch up to BRT just ahead of them, who is 3rd on the standings, I believe. So this team, you got to watch out. AHDRL, they're absolutely crushing it. And you look, Kim Hurst, she's a mum of 2 boys, but also a full-time doctor, and she's got some Palmares to her name. Cyclocross New Zealand national champion 3 times, has won the world 24-hour solo mountain bike, and she's also popped across the ditch and won the Aussie Cyclocross National Champ Series in 2017. So she is a serious rider in this AHDRL team, and I think this is a team to watch. I'm loving how they're looking here, and they are just plowing through the competition.
It's a very strong overtake, and Ace of Cakes really appear to be on their form tonight. And we do have some exceptional individual riders out there, and I think that's really important to note because sometimes when you get into the Zwift world, it's a little bit anonymous, and I've got to say I use that for the superpower that it is sometimes, especially when I'm on bad days, Anna. But we do have some athletes who have achieved absolute heights of the sport, whether it be the Olympics, the national championships, 24 hours riding anything, I think is a pretty big effort. To be honest, it's super impressive, let alone coming out on top after 24 hours. And so these riders, they have a lot of skills. But let's just talk about the kind of rider who suits this kind of event, Anna, because a cyclocross rider or a mountain bike rider is actually really well suited to a team's time trial. And the reason for that is because a cyclocross event or a mountain bike event consists of a huge number of very powerful accelerations and then a bit of recovery. And that is, they're not the kind of riders who go flat out all day at one pace. This kind of event, as we know, if you're on the front, you might be over 5 watts per kilo. If you're on the back, you might be under 3 or around the 3 mark. So it actually really does suit the cross riders or the mountain bike riders, because the winning factor is that they don't have to worry about skills.
Yeah. Looks like we're just following the C category here. So this is TBR Smile On. We mentioned them at the start. I think they're doing particularly well in this race series, and they've got their strong rider group of 6 here, and we've got some great bike setups. Like I said, the disc wheels there on 3 of those bikes, and then 3 Tron bikes. These guys know what they're doing, and they are riding very well. 39k an hour, which is very fast for the C category riding. They're 21k in, and they've managed to keep their full team complement over that first area of hilly rollers. As we see some split times coming up in the bottom left of our screen. So TBR Smile On is doing extremely well. Looks like they're about 20 seconds ahead of AHDRL We Ate the Cake. And there's a little battle on between BRT and AHDRL for that second and third position. Then with the Caffeines in 4th. So there we go. There's a bit of a battle here in the C Cat. I think TBR will be home and hosed with this. They don't have too long to go. They're going to go through the desert, up a little bit, and then down into under the ocean, through into downtown. So I think they're doing pretty well here with a good, handy 20-second lead. But the little group behind, I think they need to stay focused and stay together.
Well, Smile On was second in the RGV team's time trial. They were about 18 seconds behind the Fiery Kittens. The Fiery Kittens, they've dropped down to third at this stage this week, looking at those intermediate splits. They started out fast, though. That's something to note. But Smile On started out faster, and they certainly look to be in very good formation out on course. There's 15 teams in the C division, and Smile On, they both, the Fiery Kitten Smile On and We Ate the Cake, and even actually down to the AHDRL Caffeines, they could all be quite competitive in the A League. And I think that is something that will come out of this series, is a few teams may move up and a few teams may move down as we sort out, as we watch the Caffeines here. What a great name, and I can certainly relate to that name, the Caffeines. They're sitting in 4th. They were 4th last week, nearly a minute adrift of the Fiery Kittens. They're certainly a lot closer to the Fiery Kittens so far, but it is a 30-kilometre course. So they're 22.8 kilometres out there now with Mel Smile. We Ate the Cake. I had a ride with her this morning. She just tapped along, had a bit of a recovery ride to get the legs going, but she certainly is very strong. She needs to make sure she tempers that effort, because sometimes, as we've discussed many times, Anna, yeah, exactly. I mean, they're all on delightfully matching Tron bikes, but she's chosen. Interesting. I'd be interested to see the exact setup, but she does have that disc setup that you talked of earlier, being the pick of choice.
Yeah, that's the bike there. Great shot there of the bike you need to choose. The S-Works with that disc wheel. If you can get the Superfly disc wheel, that's even better, but I think you've got to be level 43. That's a really colourful looking one. Oh, there we go. As she waved at the screen. Absolutely love that. Gosh, it's like we're right there watching in real life. I just absolutely love that. And we did follow just a little bit before with TBR Smile On a rider called Linda Van Dyke. Now, I've just been told she has done Alpe de Zwift more than 50 times. So
I'm sorry,
thanks for that,
what?
Anne Richardson,
50 times?
commenting over on YouTube. Yeah, 50 times. Oh, man, I had a brief thought about maybe Everesting that, and then thought, hells no, I'm not going to do that. And so 50 times, full respect there to Linda Van Dyke. That's a great little tidbit of knowledge. Looks like we're going back to the A's now. We're following AHDRL Ace of Cakes. This is I think the team we have, yes, with Wilcox and Kath McKay, who has been doing extremely well. And I do want to talk a little bit about Kim Wilcox as well. So she's a mum of 3. She's living in Melbourne. She is a mountain biker. So to your point before, Katie, she's a a mountain biker who is very strong, and she says she prefers the longer races. She's won the National Mountain Bike Marathon Series in Australia, and loves Zwift because it's convenient with 3 kids. So this is right up her alley, and this is why this AHDRL team is doing just so well. And they're coming very near the end of this race. I think they've got about 1,500 meters to go. They've come out of that little uprise out of the underwater area, and they've kept their full team of 6, which I'm super impressed by, because I've said to my team, if you're absolutely dying, drop off on that little hill with 1,500 meters to go, and they are not dropping anybody.
Well, the SF Cakes are thundering along, but big kudos to Zed Zunderstruck, because they have moved up. They were 4th in the first TTT, a minute and a half back. But they certainly are a lot closer in this one. They're only 30 seconds adrift at the 18K mark. Of course, it's 30 kilometres in total, and Ace of Cakes are looking beautifully intact. Davidson was super impressive in Richmond. And I think as this series goes on, we're starting to really identify the individual riders who are certainly very strong within their teams, but we're also identifying the teams who are spending the time and the effort to get that group together, to ride together, and to make sure that they follow one of those strategies. Another overtake here for the Aero Flyers, overtaking one of the BRT teams. Again, there's a bit of etiquette to overtaking, Anna, and the Aero Flyers need to make sure they hold the right wheels. A simple example this morning in our bunch ride, we had the World Open, and so we had a couple of random riders popping in and out, and if you're not careful, they can really wreak havoc with the togetherness and the group compact of the whole team.
Yeah.
So they do need to pay a bit of attention. But the Aero Flyers, they look like they've done a pretty good job.
They've done okay. I mean, I'm a little bit disappointed. I thought maybe they could have off-seeded the AHDRL Ace of Cakes, but you can just see with those times, they've been absolutely dominant. But with the Aero team here, it's just unfortunately they've got 5 riders. I don't know when they dropped that 6th rider, or if they had a 6th rider, but you really need the full complement in this kind of a course where you've just got, up to 18 kilometers of just dead flat road. So, a bit disappointing for them. I think in the first TTT they were 2nd, and I'm not sure that they're going to be in a 2nd place here. It looks like they've been taken over by Zed Sun and the other AHDRL team. So all in all, a little bit of a disappointing race there from the Aero Flyers.
Well, they were 2nd at the RGV. They were only 34 seconds behind Ace of Cakes. They're a bit further back now. We're seeing the men on screen now. The men out on the same course, so 30 kilometres around the magnificent 8 course. And as we have described, it is largely flat, but at the 8 kilometre mark, they do have to go up the hilly reverse KOM. They are past this now, the team we're watching, race 3R, so they're 14.4 kilometres in so far. And we can see that the board is changing fairly rapidly now as we get people come through the time checks. And this is kind of a way, Anna, that you check, okay, yes, we can say on, because what we want to see is quite a consistent pace and gap from that 6 kilometre, 12 kilometre, 18 kilometre checkpoints. If anything varies a huge amount, then we certainly know that the teams have maybe gone out too hard, haven't considered their strategy. Now, of course, this data coming through is super helpful for us as commentators, of course, but also for the riders. But that said, Anna, I think even if you're getting all of this data through, unless you've started too conservatively and you're like, oh, guys, we really need to pick up the pace, for the most part, in a TTT, you're all on the limit for most of the time. You're doing the absolute best you can. And the strategy very much needs to come from within the team. If somebody's leading that, then maybe they will encourage them. But they could get in a little bit of trouble by just staring at those intermediate splits and looking at the time board.
Yeah, it's something I've said to my own team, and a sort of mantra I raced with myself when I did a bit of racing was, you just can't control other people's times. So the only thing you can control is how you're riding and the communication you have with your team. And so I think it's an absolute waste of time, a little bit passionate about this topic, to just be staring at what your competitors are doing. You need to go out and you need to race your own race. And that's where you'll see those teams who are doing really well. We just saw in the women's race, that AHDRL team, I will guarantee they probably aren't getting time splits. They are just gunning to their own plan and they are making it work. And I think, you hit the nail on the head there. You've just got to put your head down and do what you can. And, so many things out of your control here. I mean, the TTT is a really nerve-wracking situation too in the start pens, because if you haven't done one before, you basically get a time that you start from behind when the gun goes, and you can't move your bike. And the most nerve-wracking thing is that your trainer is going to go to sleep, because you see that quite a lot, and it can be really scary when you go to hit go and suddenly your bike doesn't move anywhere. And so there's a lot of things out of your control in this race, but what you can control is your own output and your own attitude.
Oh, that's exactly right. I mean, I told my 5-year-old today, Anna, that she needed to paddle her own canoe. It's a slightly different sporting analogy, but it's in a similar vein. You really need to focus on what you're out there for. I also had the kind of Zwift ride this morning where my trainer didn't connect and my DI2 went flat. So I think that they need to make sure they're very, very well prepared when they go out there. But that is an opportunity to get very nervous, isn't it? Sitting in those pens. We've talked about the physical components of this, but the mental component is a really big thing. When you're sitting in the pens, are you all communicating? Are you all chatting to each other and kind of keeping each other calm, or is it each man to himself in that regard?
No, I think definitely when it's when you're just sort of sitting there in the pen ready to go, you'll chit chat about a whole bunch of things. Depends what your team's into. Like I know we like to just keep things relaxed, have a chat about our days. We've got athletes from all over the world. I'll be quite interested to talk tomorrow with some of our US athletes about what's happening in the elections over there, and you just kind of shoot the breeze for a while. But someone's on time checks, they'll be saying 10 minutes to go, 5 minutes to go, 2 minutes to go, and then once the race goes, it's like I said, not a lot of talking. But some people like listening to a little bit of music. We've got a whole raft of different professions out there. And I know on our team we've got a record producer, I think. And so, we get good Spotify playlists. Sometimes it's just a great way to get to know your teammates. That's why I love the team time trial. You talk a lot afterwards. It is a little feature I have asked Zwift for, which is I wish there was a virtual cafe at the end, because you finish a time trial like this and you just want to talk with your team about how awesome you all are, and it would be great to just sit there over an espresso and have that conversation. But you'll just sit there warming down on your bike and talk about how great you are and how fantastic you all are at team time trialing.
Well, yeah, I mean, I can help you out there if you like, Anna. You're awesome, and you did great. If you ever need that.
Yeah.
No, I get
Thanks.
Totally get what you're saying though. And it's funny because on a lot of our Zwift rides, a lot of the conversation is about what we're having for breakfast afterwards. People talk about putting the coffee on and being able to smell it. There's a lot of people trying to bring a lot of different sensory aspects to the virtual world. And I think that the Discord is a very important way to bring a bit of sight and sound. So let's just look at these split times. The women's division C, TBR Smile On, brilliant ride by them today, ahead of We Ate the Cake. They are certainly leading the way. They were watching the Comets come into the finish, 30 kilometres or just shy of 30 kilometres out on course today, and a very fast finish. So they're finishing over the 40 kilometre an hour mark, and AHDRL, quite a mouthful there, Spin Mafia are not too far behind. There's a lot of teams that are finishing with 4. That may be because they started with 4. It may be also because they lost a few riders out on course. We can talk about that strategy in a minute, but we're watching Tri-Velo BRT. It is a fast and furious finish for a lot of the teams finishing together here, heading into that finishing line. And Anna, there's nothing quite as satisfying when you're in the Hurt Locker as seeing that finish banner across the line.
Oh, yeah. And aren't you in the Hurt Locker in this team time trial at the end here? It's just Once you've got 1,500 meters to go, and you basically go all in, and you've almost got nothing left to give, and it is you can just see we've got a sprint happening here, heading up into 5 watts per kg here from Jedi in the AHDRL donuts. Up out of the saddle, this team is motivated. Be interesting to see where they're sitting at the end of this race, because that was a great finish with 5 riders. If we look at the strategy, the end of this ride, like I said, you want to stick with the 6 riders or the maximum riders you've got for as long as possible, but there is a little climb out of the underwater area, and I think if you're going to drop anyone, if you're communicating, that's the time to do it, because you've only got 1,500 meters to go. You can just push the power, and it's not too bad with 1,500 meters to drop down to those 4 riders at the finish. As we head back here to the men's race, so we're following here Team BRT on the men's side. We've got a few little battles happening in the men's race as well. I'm always intrigued by what's happening with Team Relentless, because they race very well individually. But in the last team time trial, they were beaten by Team ZWC APAC. I'm interested to see what's going to happen with Relentless today, because I believe they have been out practicing, and it will be good to see if that comes to fruition and they can keep their top spot on the podium after the 3 races with Team ZWC right on their heels, as well as DPAC. So I don't know if you remember from last week, but DPAC were extremely good in that last lap of the Richmond race and took out a lot of the preems on offer. And they obviously have the sprint legs. Will they have the team time trial legs?
Well, yeah, it's an interesting point. I mean, Relentless were super impressive on Richmond, but it does take a very different skill and mix of rider to do a TTT. The BRT, what strategy do you call this, Anna? Because I think this is almost a little bit of a hybrid gone wrong is what I would call it. They do need to make sure that they stick together, because for anybody who's been in game, what pops up on screen is a little message letting you know exactly how many meters you are from the back wheel and that you need to bridge the gap. I've got to say, it's one of the most demoralizing messages you can ever see when you're at max heart rate. To do that. But they would all be popping up, and so they know this is going on. We've switched over to Relentless. We were just talking about this and how good they are as individuals. Yep. They're all on the Tron bike. Look at this, all 5 of them, which I'd suggest would be a team strategy.
Yeah. Do you know what I found interesting about the Tron, though, which is why we don't tend to use it as a team? Again, a little top tip. I feel like I'm giving too much away, but you can't actually tell if you're in the draft by looking at the rider position. So when you're on the Tron, you're just in that one position you'll see. Whereas if they're on a regular bike, they actually sit up in game when they're in the draft, and it can be a lot easier in a team time trial to just know what's going on when you're looking at the screen. So there we go. Another little top tip Tuesday for you is maybe don't use the Tron if you want to see if you're on the draft. But we do see Relentless here. 4 riders.
Well, they're only 8 kilometres in, so they've gone. They're on the KOM. This is an interesting tactic from them if they did start with 6 riders. But I will say, Anna, that sometimes a good tactic is to use riders early on. Not always, but it can be part of the strategy. So we need to consider that maybe they're trying something different. And I'm going to give kudos to any team who tries something. Work, not work. You've got to take a risk sometimes in order to get that gain. So big high five and gold star effort to any of the teams who might be trying a new tactic out there today, because whether it works or not, it's still a good way to do it. So we're taking a look at these splits here, and we've got 20 teams in the Division A. Team ZWC Attack were the winners last time. Evo Savages, we can see in number 6 on the table there, because we have to make sure we take a look at the number on the left there. They were 6th last week. They were nearly 2 minutes down on Attack. But what struck me, Anna, is one, we're looking at a solo rider here. So where's his team? Is it up front?
So he's been totally jettisoned off the back on that ZWC team when they went up that little climb. You could see he actually dropped a feather power up. So it's quite interesting to see they've got power ups enabled here. And he did drop the feather and didn't manage to get back on. And if I was in the team, they were so close, they could have just quietened down a little bit at the front and let him get back on, because now he's basically gone. So that's the end of his TTT for today. And they've only now got 4 riders up the front. And oh, wait, and no socks. Was that it? Is that what made him drop off? You always wonder that, don't you?
He must be a triathlete, Anna.
Well, there we go. That's why he dropped off.
He looks like he's given up the goat, because he's now riding at 120 watts, 110 watt. I mean, that's not trying. If he was actually trying to chase and get back on, he would be sitting over 300 watts. I would suggest. I also like how the game has given him some lovely calf definition there. Thank you very much. If anyone from Zwift is listening, my avatar would love some very defined calves. Thank you very much. So
this is, I'll tell you a bit about IKD here from ZWC. Sorry, he was just taking a turn at the front at around 8 watts a kg. He was 4th. In race number 1 of this series. He had an amazing race for ZWC. We didn't see him so much in Richmond, but amazing race when they went around that really difficult course in Watopia. And we see he's just doing some big pulls off, and I'm loving what I would call the TTT traditional strategy here. They're almost riding single file, and they've still got 5 riders here, and they've all got, as you can see, no Tron bike. They're rocking the disc wheels and those specialized Venge. So they have got the best setups, and it looks like they're riding away with this race again today.
Well, every now and again you see pop up on screen on the right-hand side under that Zwift Racing League table, one of the comments from the riders, and we just saw one, too much for my little weight. It can be quite comical, actually. It's an element that we don't see in IRL racing, because we don't actually get to see or hear what they say, which, I think we could certainly work on that for the broadcasting of that. But I do encourage the riders to comment, because it certainly makes it a lot more interesting. But that does go to show, doesn't it, that a lot of the riders in the Zwift world come together and join a team, and it's a lot based on watts per kilo, but it's quite different to riding a team's time trial in, say, a World Tour team, where the riders might be chosen, Anna, because they're all of a similar height, and so they all have a similar profile when it comes to not only power but aerodynamics. That's something that's really cool about this world, is that they don't have to worry about that. So it's far more about physiology and what they're capable of, and if they happen to be a metre 50 or they happen to be 2 metres, it just doesn't matter. I love that. It's a bit of an equaliser.
It is, yeah. I just, when we were watching DPAC before, they were playing a bit of a risky operation. They were in that traditional time trial mode, but they had some massive gaps between them. Looks like they've pulled it in, but that was a little bit risky for them, and it looks like they're just dropping off Mackay there in the back. So they need to be careful. They are, rolling through really well. They were 3rd in the last team time trial, but they're just down to 4 riders, and I think they just got a little bit out of control there. Someone just got a little bit too excited off the front, just pushed it too far, and they got strung out. But looks like they're back, as I'll use Dave's words, Grupo Compacto, here on the road in the desert. And again, a little bit worried about that rider slingshotting off the back, but hopefully they're talking. That's Firminger, Kiwi rider, late in the night for New Zealander, 10:30 here. So maybe they're just falling asleep at the wheel a bit.
Well, I do love that it allows any time zone to join. You've just got to be keen enough to do it. It's nearly 8:30 here in Australia, and certainly a lot of the APAC riders are from Australia, but we've seen a strong contingent in the ZWC team from Japan, which is awesome. So it is an opportunity for people to race from all over the place in these different community leagues, and some of them jump across leagues depending on different time zones. America West tomorrow is also a very good time zone for the Aussies. It's the middle of the day, and we see a lot of the riders doubling up to go across those. Now, at the 12 kilometre mark, the ZWC, we've spoken about them. We can see them on screen. Largely a Japanese contingent, but we've got Rich in there, who is the Aussie. and he's on the front at the moment, pulling the pace and going nearly 7 watts per kilo. So that's a pretty impressive effort. And they are going fast out on course, but matched equally. Now look at this, Anna. 24:20 at the 18-kilometre mark for both of the teams. They also had equal splits at the 12-kilometre mark. Now, last week...
Evo Savages and Team WC, that is some close racing. That's going to be nail-biting right down to the finish. Love it.
Well, what's interesting is that last week the Evo Savages were a minute 41 down on the Team ZWC. So, I think that's a pretty interesting outcome. Actually, I'm going to take that back, Anna, because as this pops up, I'm seeing it's the Blast, Team ZWC Blast. Team ZWC Attack were the winners last week.
Right, okay.
So Blast
we might not see
now
their time checks just at the moment.
Yeah, that's it. So they're just out on course. We'll see them soon. But the Savages were about 20 seconds ahead of Blast last week. So have the Blast perhaps taken a few lessons from the Attack team? Maybe, because they are certainly having a little bit better ride this week than they did last week. But also the Savages have been very consistent. And the times change ever so slightly on those split times as the data comes through. An awful lot of data feeding into this, and what an incredible capacity that Zwift has to have so many teams out on course and racing, and very thankful that they're able to do it.
My question is, M. Rich, who's the Aussie on this Japanese team, what language would they speak on Discord? Is Rich fluent in Japanese?
I think that there's got to be an element of, as you said earlier, the heavy breathing and the grunting that is perhaps bilingual. I don't know that you need to be fluent in any language to understand what's going on there. But good question, because we have touched many times on how important communication is. But it also kind of touches, I think, Anna, on how sometimes we lean very heavily on communication being very verbal. But if they're on video, there's a lot of hand signals that could go on. There's a lot of 1 or 2 word commands that can be used. And one thing I learnt when racing was that you never said go or no, because they could be misinterpreted across different languages. And so it was always go or stop. And it didn't matter what language you spoke, you knew that go meant keep attacking and stop meant stop attacking. It was pretty simple. And so Rich might have been given just a couple of commands to use in that regard to get this going. Or maybe they're simply using, the communication, the language of Zwift, which is very power-based. So maybe they're just looking at the numbers and trying to interpret it from there.
Yeah, that is a good point. I mean, I know my team doesn't understand me half the time with my New Zealand accent, so I could probably be speaking another language. But it does always interest me how you've got, these, you can see on the right-hand side there, look at all those flags. Massive international field here in the men's race. We saw in the women's, it was mostly Australians and New Zealanders. And in this race, it's a huge mix. Japanese, looks like German there, and you've also got the relentless American team. So, yeah, we are watching, looks like we're watching the Evo team. This might be the Evo Savages. Looks like we've got some comments here from our YouTube channel. Sebastian Dennis is keenly following what the Evo Savages are doing. So if he has any little tidbits of knowledge, feel free to share those through so we can share them on the stream. But they're riding pretty well here. I'd say holding about 39k an hour, going up around a 2% grade. Looks like they're just coming out of the desert. So out through that long flat phase, and they'll be heading into the watery area before they hit downtown. So they're nearing the end of their race, about 5 kilometers just over to go. And they've still got a 5-rider group here taking nice little turns. So they're maintaining good speed, and I'd say a very solid ride all around from this Evo Savages team.
They are going a little bit slower than we thought that they would. So last week, the winning teams in the A was ZWC Attack, but even all the way down to 7th with ZWC Blast, Relentless Deepak, Aero Masters, Wes 2 and Evo Savages in the middle. They all averaged around the 47 kilometre or above average mark. We're seeing a bit lower speeds this week. Why that's relevant is because sometimes those lower speeds actually require a little bit higher slog power, and it can be a bit harder on the legs. That might be counterintuitive to think. You might think that higher speed requires higher power, but it doesn't always, because it really does depend on the course. And sometimes those lower speeds often mean slightly higher power and slightly lower cadence, and that can hurt the legs a little bit more. DR all for cake here, a little bit strung out. They need to start working a little bit together, but they're coming into the finish. So that makes sense. It's nearly the 30 kilometre mark for them, and it's all to the line, but they are timed on that final fourth. So yes, we can understand why they're a bit spread out to the finish, but Anna, it still makes sense to stay absolutely all together until that finish line, because literally every second can count.
Yeah, so you'd almost say, like, once you exit that tunnel, you'd go, okay, team, we're all in, and the 4 riders who can hold on stay together. So again, don't, you can see it here with Zed Sun. Don't have one rider just go maniacally off the front, just going, yes, we're right near the end, get home-itis, let's just push those watts up to, 360 and drop everyone on my team. It's, let's push it up a bit, still keep together and really, fire through to the end. But, like you said, there's just no point in sort of playing the individual game in this team time trial. And you can see they're catching up now, and they'll finish with these 4 riders. It looks like they've had a pretty good race, the Zed Sun team. They're just passing another rider just in front of them. So it'll be interesting to see where they're sitting overall after this one. Can't see that they're in the top 5 from the last team time trial, so maybe they could crack that. As we see Cryogen crossing the line, and they're all coming in thick and fast now. BRT, the women's team did very well tonight, and the men's teams looks like they've had a solid performance.
Yeah, now if we take a look at the split times on the left of screen, now we're getting an idea of what's happening out on course with the top teams from the last team's time trial. Team ZWC Attack, they were fastest in the last one, and they had 20 seconds overall to Relentless. It looks like not a dissimilar gap after 18 kilometres. That's still 12k left to go. But the interesting one is Deepak. They were in
Relentless.
They were about 30 seconds off Relentless. It looks like that has been equalised now, because they came through the 18k mark at exactly the same time at 23:38. If we delve a little bit deeper on that, at the 12 kilometre mark, Deepak were up on Relentless by 7 seconds. So they have lost 7 seconds in 6k, and they did also start quicker in that first 6k. They were already 6 seconds up. So I'm going to say that Relentless are riding a very smart race and negative splitting it, and they might come home quite quickly. But Deepak, full kudos to them, because they've really thrown a cat amongst the pigeons in going out pretty hard. And, it pays, as we talked about, Anna, it pays to try a different strategy sometimes. Last time in the RGV TTT, we saw a number of the teams finish a lot faster than they started, which suggested to me that they weren't all over the strategy. A lot of them finished with a few too many matches in the box, and they didn't quite go as hard as they could. And I think this week is an opportunity for them to go a little bit harder, to push those limits a little bit earlier on in the race and see what they're capable of. And Deepak RP is certainly showing that is a way to do it, as Aerobics cross the line and they're looking in a lovely formation. And it's pretty common to see 4 riders, Anna. A lot of the teams are down to 4 riders, shedding a rider pretty early. But it is 30 kilometres, so if they do come to the finish with 4, that's not necessarily a show of weakness.
I think Peter here is played this pretty well. This is where I would be dropping a rider. Just in this last little portion, you can see that rider just in the distance that's dropped off the pace. But this is perfect. They're coming through, 4 riders all together. They're going to cross the line. There's no point sort of holding back in 1,500 meters because you're not getting a massive draft benefit with just an extra rider for that short period of time. So they played that really well. That was a great finish to their race from Peter. And, we talked a little bit before about DPAC and Relentless. I think what we're seeing is DPAC, I think they're going to regret it. They dropped that rider on that Watopia KOM, and they really shouldn't have, because they're coming into such a long flat period that rider would have made a huge difference to be able to take some turns. Even if they were short, 20-second turns, it gives everyone else a little bit of a rest. It just has fresher legs and they can push a bit harder. So I think that might come back to bite them, and you can see that with Relentless catching them up. As we're watching TBR Vanderpool here, I don't know if it's a relation of Mathieu Vanderpool. Pretty cool.
Well, slightly different spelling, but I love the
we'll go with it
association.
Anyway.
And possibly we spoke about it in Richmond. Dave Toll and I last week. Actually, we were talking about Peter Sagan and Van Aert and Vanderpool, and how interesting their racing had been, and how a lot of these riders were certainly achieving similar feats in the Zwift world, and that how exciting it was to see the racing really get attacking. And I get the feeling that both in the TTT and in these points races, Anna, that a lot of these riders, that they are watching the World Tour, they are watching the pros, and they're taking some lessons from them.
Yeah, and everyone likes seeing their heroes out on Zwift, and it's been really cool seeing some of those riders, out and about in Watopia. We're looking at, I think this the Evo Savages coming through now. They've had a really solid performance today. You'd be hoping for maybe a top 5 out of them, as we're just seeing Dave here cross the finish line and cruise his way into a warm down, and back to Relentless. Now they've still got their 4 riders. They're just hitting that little climb coming out of the desert area, about a 3%, a little bit of a false flat for a while. Again, this is an area you can very easily drop some riders off the back. Disappointingly, just the 4 riders. So I'm not sure where their, A rider Greg Grosicki is. He's the one who's won the last 2 scratch races, and I know that he'd be good at time trialing. It does come from a triathlon background of the last 10 years, so he knows how to time trial. So I'd be interested to know, I know that their team manager often watches our stream, if he can let us know, why is Grosicki not racing today? Did he have a technical, or maybe he's a little bit sick or something? But I think that's going to be a big hit for this team, just riding with 4 now. I mean, there's 4 very strong riders. Duffy did very well last week in the race around Richmond, as did Cantanazaro, but without the 5 or 6 riders, you're always going to be a bit of a disadvantage. And ZWC, 3 riders leading the pack here. They've dropped to 4th, so they need to make sure that they come back together as they're approaching the finish line. They're within a kilometre, and they just got a little bit in a bit of a shambles there, but looks like 4 of them have come back together. ZWC Attack, that is our reigning TTT champion team, and it looks like they've had an extremely stellar performance tonight.
Well, it looks like they've got a few ants in their pants, but they're coming into the finish. They had such a good ride in the previous weeks. The time's slightly slower than I think a lot of the teams may have expected, only by a minute or 2, but that can play a little bit with the psychology of it. Duffy Jr. from Relentless, we see this team, they're looking really neat. They are, I'm not quite sure how you would categorize this delightful blob we're seeing, but to me this is really fast, Anna, because they're rotating, they're not doing long turns, they're rotating fairly quickly and all taking a full advantage of that draft effect. And those Tron bikes look quite nice, all strung out in different colours. I feel like they really coordinated that one. But Duffy Jr., it's interesting what you say, Anna, about triathletes being very good time trialists. What I will say is that sometimes the really good time trialists make rubbish team time trialists, because the profile, the power profile is quite different. When you're doing an individual time trial, it's a lot more like a diesel engine that needs to get up to speed. When they're in a team's time trial, if they're not on the front too much, it is very much more an on-off kind of effort. Some people cope with that really well. They take that extra recovery, and it means that the turns they can do can be longer and stronger. But there are some riders where that on-off effect actually makes their legs feel a little bit dead and a little bit heavy. And I think that
Mm.
might catch a few riders out here that we might not yet be familiar with. But I tell you what, Anna, at the end of the 10 weeks, I think we'll have it down pat which riders are absolutely just suffering through these teams' time trials and which ones are really
Exactly.
relishing it.
Yeah, and I will just say I have seen a note come through from Greg Krosicki that he did have a Zwift technical, so that is why he is not riding with his Relentless teammates, and a bit gutting really because he got up at 3 in the morning to represent his team, and now will just be playing a bit of a DS role and helping them through. But Greg hopefully can share a bit of strategy as to what they were looking at doing today as we're watching DPAC here, because they are all on par. As we saw at that 18-kilometre mark, DPAC and Relentless at the exact same split time there. So we've got a real battle on our hands. And this is a battle for not only today's team time trial, but also for that overall placings that we see for the points added to each week. So DPAC here, they've dropped another rider. They're just down to 4. So it really is mano a mano here with 4 riders from DPAC coming out of that tunnel, 1,500 meters from the end, and then 4 riders from Relentless also coming in within the last 5 kilometers from them finishing. So going to be a little bit of an epic battle here. This is the part of the course that I'm really interested in with team strategies as we go back to Relentless, because this is a bit where you kind of pop up to around a 4%, 5% grade. If you've got 5 or 6 riders, I would say drop a rider there. Just absolutely push it. Whoever drops, and you take your 4 riders to the finish line, because then it's flat to the finish, 1,500 meters, but don't wait for anyone on the hill at this point with such a short little bit of time to go. And Relentless, they're just at the start of the tunnel. They're moving through really nicely. Like you said, they've got those sort of Tron bikes that match their kit, and yeah, they're rolling through. I like it. They've pulled in some time. Looks like they might move up a position from their last team time trial effort.
Well, style points to Relentless. Really interesting if you look on screen, Anna, to the left on the split times. We can actually see ZWC Attack 1.3k to go, DPAC 0.8k to go, Relentless 2.3. That indicates to me that Relentless, and bearing in mind Relentless are chasing Evo Savages, DPAC are chasing Relentless, ZWC Attack are chasing DPAC because they start in reverse order about a minute apart. That says to me that Relentless have dropped a bit of time from that 18-kilometre split where it was even with DPAC. But I also think that ZWC Attack on track to have another belter. So DPAC go across the line. Their ZWC are not far behind. They're at the nearly 29-kilometre mark. So they're literally hundreds of metres left to go. Now, in the last time trial, they did win by 27 seconds. I'm not sure the advantage will be quite as great there because a really great ride from DPAC. Relentless, we can see now, they're a little bit further back. They've dropped a bit of pace since that intermediate split. So let's see how that finishes up, but they are belting along at nearly 50 kilometres an hour. Bearing in mind that in the last TTT they averaged nearly 50. They averaged 48.2 km. So it was fast, the RGV. They've been a little bit slower out on course, but they are bringing it home. So a fairly tempered effort. And these 4 riders, well, they can't afford to drop anybody, can they? Because when you only have 4, you do need to keep it together because if one drops, you are in big trouble. But their heart rates, they're certainly pushing up there. Galambos over 160. We don't know how high their max heart rates are, but fair to assume that anything over the 160 mark is pretty high. And these guys are certainly working very hard.
Pushing those watts. I mean, ever since they've come out of that tunnel, they're all pushing around 4.8 watts. As we see a massive sprint here from the WTRL Pioneers, loving that. But Relentless still right up 5.76. They are bringing this home. They are just absolutely gunning this. All those 4 riders, kudos to them. They are not easing up at all. 7 watts here from Cantanazaro. And this is just an extremely good finish. They must know they are very close to that DPAC team, and they just want to eke out as many points as they can get in these last few meters. But that has been a brutal ride for them. With only 4 riders, there'd be very, very little break, and they deserve a drink after this ride.
Well, when they cross the line and their avatar starts freewheeling, that is pretty much them collapsing over their handlebars, and it is all over. We switch over to the Div C now with the TT1 Carbos. They're clipping along pretty well. They're looking pretty neat out on course too. A lot of these riders, they may be newer to Zwift than some of the A division riders, but it absolute says a lot for their communication and their style of riding, Anna, that they can ride so neatly and employing a very traditional way of riding, pretty much single file, so taking responsibility for the pace one at a time. But as you mentioned earlier, they are dropping power-ups, which of course suggests that they're in a bit of trouble, because you tend not to drop a power-up if you're doing really well. But we've got a few gaps opening up. They were looking very neat up that little pinch, but I think it bit a few legs, a few feather power-ups were dropped, and they do need to come back together, because one rider finishing on his own is of no value. They do come back together. 5 riders, compact, riding pretty well. TT1 Carbos, they're looking good at this stage. They're sitting in about 7th based on intermediate sprints, but they're not too far off that podium if they can finish it off well.
Yeah, exactly. And it was interesting coming out of the tunnel that you saw a bunch of feather power-ups being dropped, which isn't normal for a team time trial. So looks like they have been enabled in tonight's race, which has added an extra little dynamic to the racing. But yeah, they're staying together as this group of 5. Looks like they've definitely got quite a difference in their power profiles of all the riders. We've got, a couple leading off the front and really a couple dropping like yo-yos off the back. But hopefully they might just drop that 5th rider now and just take these 4 to the line. Looks like they are doing that. That 5th rider has dropped off now. They're probably just talking on Discord saying, mate, you've done all the work you need to do tonight. Go have a cruise, cruise this last 500 meters. And yeah, like I said, go get a drink after this, because this has been some absolutely huge performances out on this magnificent 8 course. I'll take your line. There's been some magnificent performances on this magnificent 8 course.
Oh, you've got to use any puns that you're given, don't you, Anna? I mean, the riders are doing really well, and I think that in this community league, hats off to these teams for doing such a good job technically, because there is a lot of skill involved in riding a good team's time trial. So as TT1 Carbos cross that finishing line, I think a lot of them will be freewheeling and leaning over those bikes, taking a very big gulp of air, Anna. And what a big night of racing, because the women, they were really impressive. They went really fast. The powers that they pushed, more to the point, were very impressive. But the one thing that I really noticed, as 2 weeks ago they were on the RGV course for the TTT, this week they're a lot neater. A lot of our formations, yes, they finished in 4, but they just looked like they were communicating better, like they'd learnt a few lessons. And frankly, I'm excited to see what happens in week 5 of the team's time trial. It's a 10-week series, so that's 5 TTTs. Because, honestly, I think that a couple of teams are really upping the stakes.
Yeah, I think so. I think you could see tonight definitely people have gone out and practiced. They've realised that points are on the line. It's not just a scratch race. It's your whole team has to cross the line for the max points. And, we saw again AHDRL, Ace of Cakes. They were a well-oiled, slick machine. They had 6 riders for, I think, almost that whole race, if not the entire race. I had high hopes for Aero. I thought I knew they'd practiced a little bit, and they looked good at the start. So they might have just, suffered a bit with just 5 riders. And I think BRT, again, they had an amazing performance last week, and I think that's just given them a little bit of momentum, a little bit of positivity, and their team brought it out today as well. So the women's racing, super impressive. I've taken a few notes myself. I like the way people have ridden. Maybe I'll add another little a strategy to my whiteboard and talk with my team about it tomorrow.
Well, let's take a look at the results when we can and see how it all shook up. So let's take a look here at the women's APAC 1. So the winner there was AHDRL Ace of Cakes, super impressive, a second TTT win. Zunderstruck, they moved up. They were 4th last time into 2nd this week. Well done, ladies. The Aero Flyers in 3rd. AHDRL Fluffy Buns. Michelle Ferris doing an awesome job there in 4th. The Devil Kittens in 5th. The Hellfire Kittens, there's a theme here, in 6th. The Bombshells in 7th. And the Cryogen Valletta coming in 8th. So very impressive riding. And as we move on to the Division C, super ride from the TBR Smile On.
That's
they were
amazing.
Second in that first week, and they've really moved up. We Ate the Cake in 2nd, the Fiery Kittens in 3rd, the Caffeines, love that name, in 4th, the Herd of Echidnas, that's even better, in 5th, the Comets, in 6th, the Cruzettes in 7th, Spin Mafia in 8th, Evo Flux 1 in 9th, and the AHDRL Degenerates, what a funny name that is, in 10th. So great racing in Division A and Division C. Anna, the men's?
Yeah, Team ZWC, we talked about a bit tonight. Amazing racing. Have taken out the win yet again. Relentless. 5 riders you can see there instead of the 6, and then it ended up just being 4 with Grosicki having those technical issues. But they've had a great result. They're in 2nd place. They beat DPAC, which is what they wanted to do tonight. So DPAC, they'll be a bit gutted they dropped the rider on that hill because they did pay for it in the end. In 3rd, Team ZWC Blast 4th, World Elite Zwifters in 5th, Evo Savages 6th, Aeromasters 7th, Cryogen 8th, TBR 9th, and rounding out with Peter Z1 in 10th place for the A Division men. And we have a look here at the B division, TBR in 1st place, Evo Barbarian 2nd, Aero Force in 3rd, Zwift Headquarter Ravens in 4th, Dirty Sprockets in 5th, Cryogen 6th, AHDR 7th, Zsun 8th, MRR B in 9th, rounding out top 10 with Velo Club Melo Sabla, if I pronounced that right. Division C, TBR 46T, another TBR team. They've had a good result in these grades. AHDR Chances, MRR C, Cryogen in 4th, TT1 in 5th, Cryogen again in 6th, AHDR in 7th and 8th, TBR 47 in 9th, and another Cryogen team in 10th.
So some great results tonight, Anna, and I've got to say we've had some pretty impressive move-ups. So if we look at the overall team league standings, AHTRL Ace of Cakes in the Women's APAC Division 1, they lead 3 points ahead of the Aero Flyers in 2nd. Z's Sunderstruck, great ride tonight. They are in 70 points, 5 points adrift of 2nd, 8 of 1st. But they are level setting with BRT Devil Kittens in 4th. The Fluffy Buns in 5th, not too far behind. Then a 10-point drop to the Bombshells. Hellfire Kittens in 7th. Cryogen Valletta in 8th. Empower in 9th. They don't have any points. They need to move up the tables if they want to keep in the running. But pretty tight at the top of the table in the Women's A. If we move on to the Women's C Division, TBR Smile On. Brilliant ride tonight, ladies. That moves them to the top of the table ahead of the Fiery Kittens, 2 points adrift. Another 2 points back to We Ate the Cake, great name. The Caffeines are sitting in 4th, the Comets in 5th, the Spin Mafia in 6th, Evo Flux in 7th, the Cruzettes in 8th, Herd of Echidnas in 9th, and the Degenerates in 10th. Pretty tight at the top of that table as well. A lot of AHDRL teams, which is awesome. I know they all support each other. Anna, in the men?
Oh, this is getting exciting. Team ZWC attack even with Relentless, both on 77 points. That is going to make for some great racing coming up in this APAC men's division. DPAC dropped down to 74 points here in 3rd place. World Elite Zwifters 71 in 4th, Aeromasters in 5th, WTRL Pioneers in 6th, Evo Savages 7th, Team ZWC in 8th, 99 Bikes in 9th, and Phoenix Cycling in 10th. But look at that top 2. That'll be a race to watch coming up. And in the B division, Aero Force has moved ahead with 77 over TBR with 75. Evo Barbarians maintains 3rd with 71, with Vision APAC in 4th, Cryogen in 5th, ZHQ Ravens in 6th, AHDR Blowflies in 7th, Dirty Sprockets 8th, Aerodynamics 9th, and Zsun in 10th. Looking at C division here, TT1 Carbos 77, only 1 point ahead of AHDR Chances. Cryogen in 3rd with 74, joint actually with TBR in 4th on 74 also. AHDR in 5th, MRR in 6th, TBR 7th, Cryogens in 8th and 9th, and Aeropress finishing up with 10th.
Some pretty tight racing all around, Anna. And I've got two shout outs for tonight. First to the TBR Smile On ladies, because that was really impressive move up. And then I'm also going to say to DPAC. Now, they were a second behind Relentless tonight. I know they pushed all the way to the line, and they would be possibly a little bit disappointed to not get the advantage because it is a point system. But last week, they were 25 seconds, or 2 weeks ago, pardon, they were 25 seconds down. That's a serious improvement. And I think they can really give themselves some kudos, some pat on the back. I mean, maybe that virtual coffee afterwards that you speak of, maybe an ice cream. It's pretty late at night for those guys. But that's a really impressive ride to pull that all together. And it just goes to the community spirit, because I think we're just starting to see the potential that these riders and teams have. And I would say that they're just starting to see their own potential. And by the end of this league, it may look quite different. And I feel like we'll have a lot of riders who are feeling a bit more empowered and really want to have a big go and maybe step up to that Premier League.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's going to be a beautiful thing. Don't want to get too mushy, but I think these riders will end up becoming friends. And I think when you start becoming friends, you know the ins and outs of your teammates, you know how to ride together, you can communicate well. You know, any good relationship, you can communicate well. And I think we're just going to see these teams get stronger and stronger and stronger as this league progresses, especially in this team time trial format.
Oh, it sounds like a big old love-in, Anna. It's fabulous. Well, Anna, thank you so much for joining me tonight. Thank you to everybody for tuning in to the Zwift Racing League WTRL Teams Time Trial. That's a lot of acronyms all in one. APAC tonight, to throw another one in. There is, of course, a whole series of racing from Premier League through to all the different divisions around the world. So make sure you tune in to the Zwift Community Live on YouTube to check it all out. And for anybody racing, it's pretty good to tune in to check out some other strategies. Anna, good luck tomorrow. I believe you're on the bike heading out there, so have a good one. And good luck to your husband for those upcoming Zwift whiteboard tutorials.
Thanks, Katie. It's been a great it's been a blast tonight. Leave that one there. And check out World of Zwift also coming up this Friday, I believe. We'll have another summary from the APAC region. Amazing racing tonight. Super stoked. And we'll see you guys all next week.
Unreal. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you same time next week.